In this video, I'm going to talk about James Robertson short stories that come from his collection Republics of the Mind. This collection of short stories was published in 2012. It is very important to stress this year of publication because they were published 2 years prior to the Scottish independence referendum. And it is also a fact that the title story from this collection and 12 other stories were basically published in 1993 in the collection of short stories entitled The Ragged Man's Complaint. So it was a conscious decision of the author to republish these stories again. Now, unlike the previous story, Liz Lochhead, by Liz Lochhead, in which we discussed this broad theoretical framework of transgendered experience. In James Robertson's short fiction, we can see the blending of the private and political. He is one of those authors in Scotland who ostensibly favors the cause of Scottish independence, and he deals with this issue. It's an occurring topic in his novels, in his short stories, in all sorts of writing that he publishes. This particular clip will be devoted to the title story of Robertson Republics of the Mind. Again, the issue that is being discussed here is that of election. It commences with the violent reaction of a Scottish woman who throws an empty wine bottle at her television screen because she's utterly disappointed by the victory of the Conservative Party on an unspecified election night. We can see that this savage act further results in the prompt explosion of the TV set. For Robertson himself, this clear illustration of the rough intensity of feelings should not be related only to this particular Scottish woman, but to the Scottish nation in general. And this violent outburst can be perceived as a sort of a reaction to a series of the governmental elections during the 1980s, in which the infamous Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher gained her political victory a total of 3 times, first in 1979 and afterwards in 1983 and 1987. So in this story we have a couple, Kate and Robert, and they engage themselves in completely opposed means of protest against this politically imposed egotism as they perceive it. Whereas Kate resorts to this meaningless and futile act of violence, Robert does not make a great fuss about his revolt. His means of protest are more inconspicuous and unobtrusive. He retreats into his personal utopian fabrication, the Scottish Republic of the Mind, as he himself calls it, in order to escape from this harsh political atmosphere in Scotland. So, as I mentioned before, this blend of political and personal is typical of Robertson's work. The main question that is raised in the story is whether these two ways of protest are valid and substantial. The author depicts Kate's throwing of the wine bottle at the television screen during an election night as the only revolutionary political act, thus literally switching off politics with the final image of the minister's face exploding. On the other hand, Robert's utopian vision of his personal republic of the mind consists of precious, intimate moments. However, the danger lies in this idea of not changing anything in the real world, but retreating into this utopian fantasy. At the end of the story, Robertson depicts his main character alone in his utopia, conversing with a seal and he exclaims, "I love you, I love you, I love you," which may be interpreted as the author's ultimate warning that, as one of the critics said, political disengagement similarly engenders loneliness and relativism. So this whole story should be regarded, as I mentioned, as a sort of a warning against this passivity of the Scottish nation in general.